Happy November, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Community at the Core, a DCA podcast. It is great to see everybody again. We are in fall season. We are actually recording on Halloween, just to keep things a little bit interesting. But we're excited today because this is going to be, from, I think, all of our vantage, a really important episode that's really about some of our most impactful members of our society and community, our veterans. And for folks that may not be aware, because I think once we hit October, November holidays come up fast, but we've got a really important observance that happens every year in November and has been going on since 1954, and that is Veterans Day. This is such an important holiday that we have to really take a moment, especially in this day and age, to remember our veterans, to remember those that have given their dedication and sacrifice to the U.S. Armed Forces. And I'm excited today because at DCA and at many of our state departments, because we've got some friends today at the newly formed Department of Veteran Affairs. But in the state, we really like to make sure that when we're looking at these observances, what's the action on the ground? And we're excited to share that we've got a pretty once-in-a-generation program that our departments have partnered with, and that's bringing veterans home. So we're going to spend a little bit today talking about that program and talking about why it matters and the value of that, especially as we tip right into Veterans Day observance. And the goal of that is to bring information to all of you, to our communities, and for folks to be able to take advantage of this incredible program. And really, I think, an opportunity for us to solve an issue that has been baking for quite some time, and that is to ensure that we're ending veterans' homelessness. So I'm excited today that we've got some great subject matter experts. Some you know, some are new to the fold because we like to keep it interesting around here at the department. But I want to make sure that we really start off with some of their background and expertise and really just remembrance of why we need to take a pause and be reminded of veterans in this space and be reminded of our community members. Because I think in some way, shape, or form, every family in this state is connected to someone in some military forces, right? Whether it's your parents, whether it's your children, whether it's your grandparents, cousins, uncles, and the like. This is something that is relevant for so many families across the state of New Jersey. So I want to start off and just share a little bit about who we've got featured here today. I have the pleasure of having Janel Winter, who's our Assistant Commissioner and Director of the Division of Housing Community Resources. Janel has been a part of some other episodes. She brings a lot of insight and expertise. She's a Jackie of all trades on every day, whether she likes it or not. But she does lead our Division of Housing Community Resources, and that does include the state's largest public housing authority, serving more than 40,000 households annually. Janel also oversees the state's home energy assistance programs that serve more than 200,000 families every year, as well as affordable housing production, the Office of Homelessness Prevention, which we're talking about today. We've got our director here, our Office of Eviction Prevention, the left and the right hand of that great complement, weatherization, lead remediation and abatement programs, neighborhood revitalization, and a variety of other community development initiatives. So just one or two things, Jay, that you cover. Janel's also has key oversight of the management and distribution of more than $2 billion in federal COVID-related funds to address rental and utility arrears and community revitalization development throughout the state. Prior to joining DCA, Janel led the Office of Housing at the New Jersey Department of Human Services, another one of our great sister agencies, and served as Associate Director at the Corporation of Supportive Housing, CSH. Before returning to her home state of New Jersey, Janel worked at various direct service homelessness and housing agencies in Chicago. We also have here Michael Callahan, who's our Director of the Office of Homelessness Prevention. Mike, welcome back with us. Michael Callahan is the director of that office and has been leveraging his deep expertise in homelessness services, nonprofit, and tech sectors with his team in OHP to drive equity in the state's homelessness prevention and services ecosystem through programming that is grounded in the end user experience, equity-focused analytics, and the democratization of housing policy and services planning. One or two things you're thinking of, Mike. He received his doctorate in social work from the University of Pennsylvania and holds a part-time research faculty appointment at Monmouth University School of Social Work. Mike, pleasure to have you with us. And I am delighted that we have a special guest from one of our other departments, Department of Veterans Affairs, a bit newly minted. We have Commissioner Vincent Solomeno joining us. Thank you so much for being here, Vincent. We're delighted to have you. Vincent has been a familiar player as we have done the groundwork in the Bringing Veterans Home program. And I want to give a bit of background about Vincent and the commissioner because I think it's really key for folks to understand you've been in trenches for a long time, Commissioner. You currently are the Administrator of Veterans Affairs for the state of New Jersey and the Deputy Commissioner of Veterans Affairs, New Jersey Department of Military and Veteran Affairs. That was your prior post, and you have just now minted right into your new position. Am I correct?
Come January.
Come January. So 2 positions, it sounds like you're juggling. Okay, which is very on brand for government for folks that don't know. So that's good that we've stayed in trend on that, Commissioner. On September 11th, Governor Murphy signed legislation establishing a new Department of Veterans Affairs and announced his intention to nominate Commissioner Solomeno as the department's inaugural commissioner. He is a U.S. Army veteran of Operation Enduring Freedom, and in his role as Deputy Commissioner and Administrator, he led a historic expansion of state-delivered veterans benefits, programs, and services alongside a team of nearly 1,600 professionals committed to delivering world-class support to the more than 300,000 Garden State veterans. I've got to say that out loud again, 300,000 strong in the state of New Jersey. Again, we are small but mighty here. Commissioner increased the number of state of New Jersey Veteran Services offices from 14 to 1 in each of the state's 21 counties over his tenure. He's driven efforts to increase wages, upgrade equipment, and implement new technology and best practices that have resulted in documented improvements at New Jersey's veterans memorial homes throughout the state. He's also chair of the governor's challenge to prevent suicide among service member veterans and their families. Commissioner, welcome, and thank you for your service.
Thank you for having me and for caring.
Absolutely. So I want to start off because I think we've made a lot of strong traction with bringing veterans home and that initiative. And some of that, I think, is a little bit of being very transparent of what this effort means for the state. But this has been a labor of love. And I think it's really important to start off with each of you and really talk about how the Bringing Veterans Home program is a beautiful experiment that represents coordinated efforts across several different agencies. And we're not just talking about state. I know we've got to get into that local influence too, and that's really the tastemakers here and making this so successful. I wanted to start off and really ask Mike and Vincent, how did this partnership between DCA, or Office of Homelessness Prevention, and DMAVA really come together? And what was that gap designed to fill when you all were imagining this program?
Gotcha. I'll go ahead and tee off, and then
Perfect.
we'll talk about the meeting that happened.
Yes.
Right. So importantly, right. One of the things we've done at OHP and here at the division is we've been able to, for the governor's office, but also the legislature, and also for all interested stakeholders across the state, finally right size instead of approximate what our total housing insecure and homeless populations are, right? And as part of that, right, we've been able to show not only the extent and the breadth, right, of housing insecurity throughout the state, but also too that housing insecurity and homelessness is solvable, right? When we can go and optimize and braid funding streams, we can deliver services in ways that are not duplicative, but we're plugging in different facets of programs where they can have the most impact, where there's the most drag or there's not enough bureaucratic inertia to get things over the finish line, right? So that being said, right, so Janel tasked me right, with what really is a population, right, that we could go and understanding some of the systemic and also strategic efforts that we have to change homelessness across the state. What is the population that if we had a sprint over the next three years that we could go and land and actually effectuate functional zero for, right? Meaning that for every single person that was entering homelessness, there was another person or household that was exiting to permanent housing, right? And so top of mind, I'm a veteran myself. I'm also a veteran of the Ending Veteran Homelessness Sprint that happened in the city of Philadelphia, right, back in 2015, 2016. And as part of that, it's, if we're going to go and re-engineer some of these systems, right, the best population to do it with are veterans, right? Not only because they're service to the country, but also too when we talk about being able to engage longitudinally with populations that speak across, right, both a partisan, but also too from a policy perspective, engaging with those folks to say, hey, there's nobody in this country that is going to say, do not house a homeless vet, right? And so understanding that, right, we right-sized the numbers, right? We got to it, and I said, hey, and Vincent and I had prior talked about, hey, Because Vincent wanted to know, I don't want to know about the pit count. I don't want to know how many homeless veterans were homeless at one night. I want to know how many homeless veterans there are right now in the state of New Jersey. Right. And so following that, right, it was back, I believe, with Major General Howe, right? Right. So the prior Adjutant General for the current tag is going and having a meeting and saying, and us laying it out, right? Particularly meeting with Major General Howe, but also too with Vincent, right? And going and saying, not only have we right-sized this population, right, but we actually have the strategic framework by which we can effectuate functional zero, right? And similarly, there seems to be the inertia from both the legislature, but also at the executive branch to go and leverage the funding that's going to be needed, working in concert with our federal partners and local partners, and that what the state is actually going to do is that strategic coordination. That is going to be the secret sauce by which we make it happen. And then in that meeting, you want to kick it over and say, but how are we going to do it? Right? That was because I feel like that particularly there wasn't beyond the vets beyond the vets havens and leveraging some SRAP or some other VASH vouchers, right? There wasn't strong connectivity between departments, and it really there was the leadership of, hey, instead of engaging on a programmatic level, let's engage on a strategic level. And I think that's really a testament to the commissioner's leadership here, is because he didn't say, no, this isn't going to happen. He said, yes, let's go. Yeah.
So Mike made the ask, and you said, Commissioner,
sign me up.
That's right.
Yes, there was that meeting, but what I want to stress is the success of bringing veterans home is possible and has been. We've housed permanently over 1,450 veterans since the first of this calendar year at the time of this recording, and that's permanently. We've helped some others, and they're on the road to stable housing. But this could not be possible without interagency collaboration, without Commissioner Suarez at the Department of Community Affairs and Janel and Michael and you saying, we have the tools, the data, I call them those smart people when I'm out on the road, because you guys have a tremendous team, and you have the reach into the veterans community. DMAVA, the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, which, as you noted in January, will be the Department of Veterans Affairs, because the governor has elevated the voice of veterans within the halls of Trenton. And that interagency partnership has been very successful. I believe it serves as a model for the future. And I will not I'll humble brag, I don't know what they call it, but the success of this program, in my estimation, will be one of the signal achievements of the Murphy administration's 8 years in government. To think that we can achieve the functional zero to effectively end veteran homelessness, that's probably the most important thing I'll do in my career, but I really believe it's a testament to the interagency cooperation, people bringing their resources to the table, their connections, their relationships, and us then getting to work. Because that was the hard part after that meeting, was then, okay, let's design a program that we believe is going to achieve the objective.
And I have to emphasize in this, what I really like is bonded in battle a little bit, for lack of a better word, but there's a level of humility, I think, that we're seeing in government that we haven't seen before. And I think that is a testament to our agency heads, right? And deciding and saying, right, we've got some of the data, right? We came to that table with some of that structuring, but the relationships, the ecosystem, right, of our veterans organizations, right? Commissioner, you and your team, right? That was a really critical piece of that puzzle, and that collaboration in terms of, I think, everybody acknowledging we've got this type of meat to bring to the table, and we've got this type of, critical component that has allowed us now to have something that, frankly, we've done in record time. 1,450 veterans that are permanently housed, and I think the measuring stick for this program was 2,000, if I'm remembering correctly.
So we did involve, and again, I'll turn it to the subject matter experts here, but pillar one of bringing veterans home was a surge of available housing vouchers. So the state dedicated through DCA 2,000 vouchers to help veterans. And the other, we call it in the Army, first order effect, and then a second order effect. The thing that happened after we started was that bringing veterans home has brought a lot of folks to the table, the constellation of veteran service organizations and providers who were doing work in this space, as well as our partners at the federal level. So what we have seen, and when we talk about that permanently housed number, that is the result of local, state, federal, and nonprofit actors.
Mhm. Let's talk a little bit, I think, as well, because when we talk about veterans homelessness, and I think, Mike, you made a very important point, right? How are we making sure that there's some healthy propagation about ending homelessness in general, right? And having us really shifting, I think, a social concept about unsheltered populations. And veterans is something that everyone can get behind. But there's misconceptions, right? And I think half of the battle that, you and Janel and the team deal with is the assumptions that people make. And so I'd like to ask, and Commissioner, we'll start with you. What are some misconceptions about veterans experiencing homelessness, right? What have you found and your team found as being challenges or those structural barriers and assumptions that make this that much harder? And then I'd love to hear from Mike or Janelle on that as well.
We begin with the guiding principle that one unsheltered veteran, one homeless veteran is too many in this state. And then as you take a step back and you begin to engage with folks who find themselves in this situation, doesn't always match with what folks might think. Where is the highest number of homeless veterans in the state? Most of the folks that I talk to say, well, of course, it's in our cities and our urban centers. What we have found as we've gone on the ground and executed is that the folks who are at risk or currently unsheltered, it's occurring in our rural areas just as much, if not more, than in our cities. And so this is not a city problem, a suburban problem, a rural problem. It's a whole of New Jersey problem.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I take away.
Janelle.
I think one of the misconceptions people have is a misconception just about homelessness. I heard someone say once that homelessness is one of the few problems where the solution to the problem is in the name of the problem, which is if you're homeless, if you're unhoused, a big part of the solution to that is having a home, having a house. The biggest drivers of homelessness in our state are the lack of affordable housing. And so we see people being driven to homelessness through eviction, through, basically financial matters. Do people need healthcare? Do people need, mental health services, addiction services, all of those, job training, all of those things? Absolutely. But what it begins and ends with is a safe, affordable place to live. And so once we can bring that, then we can layer in all of the other things that are going to make someone really thrive. But without that home, without that place to live, we're not going to be able to do those things very well. And I think that's something that there's a lot of misconception about. But I think when you see it work, you really understand it, that it makes a lot of sense. Of course, you're going to do a better job of working on all of those things if you know where you're sleeping that night. And I think one of the things that's enabled us to be really successful in this project is that New Jersey has a long history of partners, of nonprofits, of people who know how to do this, how to help people get into housing and maintain that housing. And that's really given us a great platform that we could launch this project from.
I think that's a great pivot point. And it's funny that you say the solutions in the name, right? Because sometimes I think we're in these realities where there's an overcomplication, right? Or a bit of a fatalist concept. And so driving back to some of that fundamental, right, where there can be some real work and effort is really critical to underscore. You mentioned, I think, the community connection, right? And people that understand the space. And I think that's a really important understanding here, and probably why we're hitting some real success points is understanding the audience and the members that we're serving, right? We've got a lot of partners here, right? We've obviously mentioned our state departments. We've got our veterans organizations, but we've had some local governments playing a really critical part in supporting this. We've got nonprofits and those veteran service orgs who are really helping to create the network that's going to support and has gotten us to that 1,450 permanently housed number. I'd like to hear a little bit about what have been some great examples of those partnerships. Where have we been able to make some wins in the past year of connecting our veterans and members of the community to get folks into this housing. Mike, let's start with you.
Sure. So I think one of the initial wins has been, I'm going to kick back to my Army days. There's General Petraeus before he left the Pentagon and he went to the CIA. He often said about veteran organizations that there's this entire ocean of goodwill, but there's only really islands of competency in it, right? When it comes to serving veterans and kind of understanding the complexity of those needs, but also to understand that complexity is incredibly nuanced, right? Across different generational segments, across different conflicts fought in, whether there's a peacetime veteran versus a wartime veteran, right? And what that looks like. And in my view, particularly in the southern part of the state, as the commissioner said, is we've kind of shifted this idea of what veteran homelessness is from the stereotypical, almost, archetypal Vietnam vet, right, that is going to be living in the woods because they have complex PTSD, to having local community organizations, whether that be a local VFW post or whether that be an American Legion post or whether that be a municipality or just another community organization that's serving homelessness but not necessarily serving veteran homelessness, understanding that, that post 9/11 single mom, right, who's sleeping in her car 2 nights a week, and that her daughter is living with grandma, right, and that that she's making it work. She's trying desperately. She's using her post 9/11 GI Bill to go to school at night. She's working, an hourly job during the day, right? She's doing everything there is, but because of the unaffordability of housing throughout the state, right, that is the key blocker. And simultaneously being able to show that, okay, we're not having means-tested programs to effectuate the exit of that veteran's homelessness. It is, what is the precursor for entering into BVH is the veteran is homeless. Right, the veteran might make more than 30% area median income, but the veteran is sleeping in her car. Right, that is what's driving that. And because of being able to merge the deployment of state special purpose funding and what that looks like, right, we can really go and say, hey, you know what she needs? She needs a security deposit and a declining subsidy of 3 months rent to help her stabilize and get into an apartment, and that is going to set her and her child up, right, for tremendous success, right. And really being able to show what the face of veteran homelessness is. And because there still are Vietnam veterans that are suffering and are homeless, right? But it's at the same time, right, we have this emergent post 9/11 veteran cohort that homelessness does not meet, right, the kind of boilerplate understanding of it across the community.
Commissioner, anything to add?
I believe in a state where our motto is liberty and prosperity. There's no reason why the woman that Mike references or her child or her loved ones should find themselves in that situation. And I feel that in many cases, folks are just a couple of bad breaks or different moves away from finding themselves in that situation. And I'm just glad that we live in a place with an enduring bipartisan commitment to our veterans, to ensuring that they are housed. And this program can and will serve, I hope, as a model to help other communities and other populations.
And I think it's important, right, as we acknowledge what the image is versus the reality of the lived experience, right? And that's verbiage I think we talk a lot about around the department, I'm sure in yours as well. And really understanding that it is our neighbors, right? It's our family members, it's our friends, and that it isn't this one size fits all, like you said, living under a bridge concept. I mean, these are families where, you're in the car, but they're showing up to work. Their kids are still going to school. They want to stay in the communities that they've lived in or their families have lived in for generations. Janel, anything to add on partnerships? Because I think that's been a bit of your swan song in your leadership with the Division of Housing is how are we really taking the essential service points and then really leveraging the folks that know how to get us to the end goal in their unique and specified communities?
I think there have been two really strong ways that we've really been able to grow and leverage partnerships. And I think the first goes back to something that the commissioner and that Mike were talking about in terms of the goodwill and the bipartisan support for our veterans. And I think especially what Mike said about that ocean of goodwill. And I think we've all seen that. But one of the difficulties has been there's been that goodwill, but people don't know how to harness it. They don't know what to do with it. And so it becomes frustrating. And I think it also, when you don't have a place to put it, it starts to make it feel like, well, there's nothing that can be done about it. This is a problem that, maybe I can help a little bit. I can give somebody a little money. I can buy somebody a meal, but it's insoluble. And I think that one of the things that this program did really well was find ways to really, in a very systematic way, let people take their goodwill and funnel it into a direction that's really going to help end someone's homelessness. So there are ways that were built using our data, using our technology that allow groups or individual veterans to refer themselves or to refer someone else to this program. And that through that, make sure that right away after that referral, someone is talking to that veteran and finding out exactly what their situation is. Because it's not going to be everyone's situation is different. Mm-hmm. And so someone can go actually talk to that person, figure out what their situation is and what's going to address it for them. And that way, when someone is saying, hey, I see someone outside or I see someone in their car, or I talk to someone, what do I do with that? You're not giving them like a list of phone numbers. Like, well, tell them to call like 90 of these phone numbers and maybe somebody will be home who knows, what to do for this person. We can say, go right to this website, refer them here. We will have someone out to talk to them who will be able to find them the right place, not rely on them to knock on a bunch of different doors, hoping they'll get something and feeling defeated every time that doesn't work. So I think that's one thing. And I think that's been really helpful in helping really engage the community and giving them tools to say like, no, you can solve this. Here's how you start. Mm-hmm. And every time that works, you're just building a stronger model. Every time it works, people say, oh, this can work. Mm-hmm. And then they're inspired to do even more. And so suddenly you've gone from something that feels very hopeless to where people are just overlapping in conversation. I can do this, I can do that. And moving that forward. And I think key to making a system like that work, though, are some of our other partnerships, which are our partnerships with our various community-based organizations. And I think one thing that we've done really well in this project is recognize different organizations' lanes. What are you good at? We have some organizations that are excellent at housing. They know how to build it. They know how to operate it. They know how to get people into it. That's their business and they do it. Do they know a lot about veterans? Maybe not. And many of them will say, I don't know a lot about anybody. I know a lot about the housing. So bring me the people and I'll put them in the housing. Mm-hmm. We have some people who are great at going out, finding people who are living outside, gaining their trust, engaging with them, bringing them in, which is, believe me, a skill of its own. And can be very, very difficult. You really need, people who are authentic, people are going to connect with and build that system of trust. We have people who do that too. Mm-hmm. And while we do have groups that work with veterans, what we really, I think, through our partnership across state agencies, we were really able to engage with a lot of groups who really work with veterans, who are made up of veterans, who live and breathe that, but who might say, well, I don't actually know anything about housing. Like I live in a house, or I don't know anything about like shelters. Like where do you take someone? And that's the part we can solve. You don't need to learn that. Mm-hmm. You don't need to build that from scratch. We already do that. Let's bring these people together. And so then when someone needs something, all of those things are there because all of these groups are working together. Mm-hmm. And I think that's been the other key is having those groups work together. You don't need to suddenly become a specialist in something. We don't want you to become a specialist in something else. That's wasteful. And we don't have a minute or a dime to waste. Mm-hmm. But when we bring you together, then that means what that veteran is going to be able to do is instead of having to go around finding all the different things they need, those things are brought to them. Mm-hmm. And then they can really use that to start, building the next phase of their life.
What I love about that is it's, back to that adage, right? The ocean of goodwill, but that island of competencies starts to become a continent. We're starting to bring all of that together. And like you said, you've got this optimization of, I know this expertise point, and if you've got A, I've got B, and then we've got now a service point where people aren't jumping around, because I know the biggest challenge is the lived experience, right? You've got folks who, if they've got to make several calls, if that family member, if somebody in that organization has to spend 2 hours on one person versus that one-stop shop, and they can get to those focal points we're doing on the back end, that could stop before this even starts. I'd like to get into a bit of storytelling, because I think it's important if we, for us to highlight, I think, some of the beautiful stories that have come out of this, right, in that 1450. If one of you could share a moment or a success story that kind of captures what the Bringing Veterans Home program has done for a particular family or veteran, I think it'd be great for our audience to hear, where has it really been a win at the end of the day? Mike, I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. So I think, importantly, the moment we're at in the federal shutdown, right, is literally yesterday. We have a VA employee that has their landlord is threatening eviction right now because they're not getting paid. And there's a mechanism by which they are going to be diverted from homelessness today, right, in the northern part of the state. Similarly, in the southern part of the state, there is somebody that goes to a state university that receives post 9/11 GI Bill benefits, but whose spouse is a federal employee, right? And that basic allowance for housing that they receive, right? That is not necessarily enough to cover when they're married to a GS-11 employee, right? To go and make that mortgage. So again, it's having those diversionary funds, and that is a real thing that's happening right now, right? Is we talk about the milieu we're in and the current economic conditions, right? Being able to be responsive to that, but without BVH, the system wouldn't have neither the elasticity nor the kind of triage mechanism to go and say, hey, you're in trouble, but you're not homeless yet, right? And it's doing that upstream prevention work that's going to prevent all of those downstream cascading effects. So it's going to save a lot of money too, for both that family and also for taxpayers.
Yeah, and that upstream concept, I think, is one that has been a consistent effort, right? Whether we're talking about homelessness prevention, eviction prevention, right? How are we really trying to stop before it starts? But it's important, I think, to highlight, we're talking about filling in gap from a lot of different pressure points and conditions that our families are facing. And so when we're looking at a veteran household, we've got a lot of multi-dimensions, right, of impact that they may be facing. And again, why this wraparound has to be so critical. Commissioner, any type of experience that you and the team have been able to see as a success point with the program, and how this really has bridged some gap, or really been the last call to really keep folks in right complement, right, and preserved?
So I'll take the question and perhaps answer it slightly different.
Of course.
In the sense of, prior to Bringing Veterans Home beginning and implementation, across the state, from High Point to Cape May, we had dedicated teams of people, sometimes individual volunteers, sometimes large organizations. And so I'll speak to the American Legions, the Disabled American Veterans, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the Jewish War Veterans. And those are just a handful of the, again, constellation of organizations that have been doing work in this space for decades. And as I think about my encounters with individuals, I'll call them individual leaders, at the beginning, there was skepticism, healthy skepticism. Because can you imagine being someone who has volunteered your time, and almost everyone who are working in this space as veteran service organizations are volunteers, doing this for decades, and now Janel, Mike, and I, or you, show up and we say, hi, we're from the government, we're here to help. What I have appreciated is, one, the suggestions from the folks who have been doing this, helping our community veterans. Two, the constructive feedback, which has improved this program over the last 10, 11 months. And three, on a personal level, to see the needle move where people begin to build trust in the Department of Community Affairs, whatever you want to call my agency today, but the state of New Jersey's ability to solve this problem. it really encourages me and gives me hope for the future. And those folks continue to be in the trenches, for lack of a better term, at the tactical level, helping their brothers and sisters, doing it because it's their labor of love, it's their commitment to service. And our job is to help make that job easier for them.
And I think the trust theme is really important, right? Some of this has not been we're here to help and everybody said, come on in. This had been a bit about us ingratiating ourselves to what was the current state of affairs, to understanding that this was going to be a not one size fits all. And then I think being better ears as government and public servants. And I think that's one of the best accomplishments out of this program, is that it really does show when we're able to be a bit more elastic and bend a little bit to what are the challenges and conditions, so that the people who are in trenches can do that work and facilitate. We get some real traction. I think it's very important, though, to note, right, because we're in current events, right? We're talking about this federal reality. We're talking about a number of challenges. And I think Jersey has been very intentional about being proactive, right? Doing this upstream concept. But we've got changing current like the wind and the gales, right? So I'd like to hear from you all a bit about some forecasting, right? Because I think it's looking like we're going to land strong, and I want to make sure we're ending the program with some specific information of how folks can participate in the program, what we've been able to do in terms of that timing and data. But what are you all seeing from a bit of forecasting to just maintain it, right? We're getting, I think we're confident we're going to hit our number that we established for the program. We're probably ahead of some curve, but I suspect that people are going to be saying, hey, this worked. Don't go anywhere. How do we forecast or manage, and what's some optimism we can also inject as we look at some of these changing conditions? Janel, let's start with you on that.
So I just want to touch first on something you just mentioned, which is about the importance of trust. And I think it's trust not only with our providers and our community stakeholders that the project can work, but most importantly with veterans who are homeless. And one of the most important ways that you build that trust is just like you build trust with anyone, which is by keeping your word and doing the things you say that you'll do. And I think, again, one of the strengths of this program and of our provider network, of everyone working on this, is everyone's dedication to doing that. And I think that's also where the models that we use to do that, to do our work, specifically Housing First, really ties into that. Because we're not saying to someone, okay, well, here's how it's going to work. You come and you do a whole bunch of things that we tell you you should do. And at the end, if you're very, very good, then you get someplace to live. And if you're not, well, then that's on you. We're saying you're homeless, you need a home, we're going to get you there. Then everything else, then we build everything else. But that is I think the core basic commitment and agreement we are making with veterans, which is you need a home, we will make sure you have a home so that you can then go on. And hopefully you'll be someone who's helping the next person along the line, just like as we talk about all these veteran groups, like doing that next. But making sure we have a system where we meet that immediate need. One big source of optimism for me is how many people we've managed to engage in this process and that we've managed to house so that trust has grown. And for every time we do that, that person also tells another person. You know, what's that old saying? You know, like you tell someone and you tell someone, and then suddenly the split screen has 1,000 people talking to each other. But every time we do it well, that message gets out. And every time we do it badly, that message gets out too. But I think we've really had a lot of people getting a really good message out to people. And I think the other thing that gives us is a really strong place to be for just what Mike said, is he mentioned, there are people right now due to, the shutdown, due to things that are happening right now, who are becoming homeless. And that's never going to change. Right. There are always going to be surprises. There are always going to be things we can't plan for. There will be economic dips, just like there are economic, strong points. Mm-hmm. And I think that the important thing for us to remember and to do with this is we're not building just, a program or just this is 2,000 people. We're changing a system so that as those things come up, we know how to deal with them. And sometimes that's going to take more effort and more resources, and we're really going to have to harness everything. And sometimes it might be a little bit less challenging. But when our systems changed, we're going to be able to just adjust that system and, to use a word Mike loves to say, right size it for whatever we need right then. But having it means we don't have to develop it from scratch every time something bad happens. We can just, make it a little bit stronger, a little bit bigger to accommodate that, instead of having to scramble and think, what do we do now? We know what to do. Mm-hmm. And our providers and our network knows what to do. And we just have to do everything we can to get out of the way and to give them the resources they need to continue to do the work.
Yeah, it's been a laying bricks as you walk the path, right? But they're good bricks. I mean, these are foundational things where, for whatever it is from tomorrow, we've got a course charted, right? We've got some credibility, right, amongst so many different players in this space. Commissioner, as you all look at forecasting and maintaining, what is an important messaging you want to get out on that end?
Well, from a 30,000-foot view, today the state of New Jersey is investing more, doing more, and achieving more for veterans than at any time in our history. And that's backed up by the numbers, as we talk about here today, the Bringing Veterans Home initiative, but it's backed up by investments that we've made to expand points of entry for services, improvements in our cemeteries, our long-term care facilities, our transitional housing facilities. I can go on and on. In many ways, the success that we have achieved, and there's still a lot of work to be done, we can always improve. That success, I'm optimistic, can and will be sustained because of an enduring and shared commitment in this state to support our service members, our veterans, and their families. And that commitment, I believe, it's evident in, you referenced the governor signing a statute to elevate the voice of veterans, a Department of Veterans Affairs. That's the name on paper, but it's evident in the progress that we've made and the support that we've received. And so as I think about the future, we know that veterans will experience homelessness long after we have left state government. I am optimistic that there is a shared bipartisan consensus that we now have a playbook to address these issues as they emerge. And I believe that long after we're gone, the state will continue to support veterans in that way.
I think that's right. I think it's also, coming down to legacy, and setting some level of long-term structuring, right, in these relationships and in knowing that it can be accomplished. I want to make sure that we end today on how people can really tap into this program, because we know that we still have some folks who are unsheltered in this community. We know that our networks are working really hard, but we can never, can't speak about this enough, and how you actually get resources to people. So if one of you wouldn't mind, and Mike, I'll pitch this to you first. If you're a listener, you know a veteran in your community, right? And you're trying to figure out, how do I support them? What action can I take? What's the first step? Where do they go? And if you could also walk through, what does that track look like? If you're a veteran who's going to enter this program, give us a bit of what that walk is so that folks understand that movement.
Yeah, sure. So, first step is, throughout the state, if you want to talk to somebody live, right? Importantly, in that partnership with DMAVA, you can call the Vet-to-Vet hotline, right? And as part of that is Vet-to-Vet will go and initiate the electronic referral, right? That goes out to one of the 6 regional coordination agencies across the state, right? And then kind of that workflow goes where if somebody's unsheltered, right, and they've engaged with Vet-to-Vet or they, whatever that description is, right? That engagement happens whether that's an ally, whether it's an accomplice, or whether it's the veteran themselves, right? Similarly, they can go to bbh.dca.nj.gov, right, which is also mirrored on DMAVA's site, right, to be able to go and initiate an electronic form referral. Importantly, that form referral, right, can be as brief as, hey, I saw somebody that was sleeping behind the Wendy's in Garwood, New Jersey, right, and I gave them some food, and they said they were a veteran, and that's all they know, right? And we can have the team, one of the street outreach teams that covers Union County, right, to go and to deploy, to engage there, right? Similarly, right, one of the great parts about this program is that it's embedded in the coordinated entry systems in every continuum of care throughout the state, right? So that somebody who presents, right, and if they're getting screened, whether it's via 211, if they're getting screened in person, say in Atlantic County, right, at the Board of Social Services there, right, it's, oh, hey, I'm a veteran. Well, guess what? Right there, it's an off-ramp, right, where they're engaged with then Soldier-On and VMC as the regional coordination entities right there, right? And it's, hey, let's get you services right now. It's not let's go and engage you in some type of queue. Your name doesn't go on a list for things to happen. It's there's action right there, and there's accountability across there too, right? Lastly, right, it's you can also engage with one of our 6 partners, right? One of the 6 regional coordination entities, right? So reaching out directly, right, to Soldier On, Veterans Multi-Service Center, Collaborative Support Programs of New Jersey, Community Hope, or Bridges Outreach, right? Any of those entities, and many of them also, importantly, right, are also dialed in and also have additional federal and other state resources, right, either through other programs that DMAVA is partnered with or other programs that they're partnered with VA writ large, right? And so importantly is that veteran is going to be able to receive services based upon their current conditions, not necessarily be, hey, we don't know whether we can tease this out or triage it appropriately. We have to send you 3 different other places, right? All that's happening in one space with one engagement.
And I think that's brilliant because what was structured between our departments was we weren't going to make something new. We were going to take the existing systems and I think user experience that we've already established, and you noted these continuums of care, major critical artery points across the state to support folks who are at risk of homelessness or facing any of those types of housing challenges. And so the fact that we've been able to set that and align it and streamline into existing structures, but have this be caveated and identified in a way that then makes it economized and very efficient is brilliant. And then also, again, goes back to that legacy, right? This isn't something where it's a one-off. You've got this singular channel for veterans, and then if that choke holds, you've got nothing else. It's being built into the infrastructure, and that to me, I think is really important to highlight, right? And that's going to keep this going. Commissioner, anything you want to add about that access point, right? We've talked about vet to vet. We've got our companion websites, right? And again, we're going to highlight this for the podcast episode because what's critically important and what we want to take home today is that people go to vet, right? They go to our sites, they go to these regional coordinators. We're going to have that information too. Anything else you want to add about that engagement, especially from our veteran service organizations who've been such a great ambassador for this program throughout the state?
I would say that our vet to vet helpline that Michael referenced, it's been in existence for over 20 years. So not just in the space of housing and homelessness prevention, if there is a veteran or a family member who has questions about benefits, resources, how to get assistance for a loved one or someone they know, contact vet to vet. It's staffed by trained and accredited veteran peer counselors who answer the phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Frankly, it's a nation-leading service that our state provides. And in addition to that, the state of New Jersey, through the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs and post-January, the Department of Veterans Affairs, in each of our 21 counties, we have physical points of entry where our veteran service officers are able to assist and connect individuals to the benefits, the programs, and the services, and this is important, that they have earned through their service. So bringing veterans home, what we are doing, this has been earned through the service of someone who at some point in his or her life raised his right hand and swore an oath to protect and defend this great country. It is our honor to be able to return the favor of that service. And so I'd encourage folks, if you run into someone, get in touch with Vet to Vet. You can get on their website and text them. You can chat with them, or you can place a call. And our expectation is that they will receive rapid and timely assistance.
And I think the numbers have shown as much, right? And I think it's great too to kind of highlight, right? Vet to Vet, these are global lifeline resources. And these are experts, right, who understand this. So as much as we look to highlight this program, I think being a reminder that that critical and multi-decade resource point has been there for our veterans and our military families is really key. We'll make sure to have that information with the podcast. I think it's a beautiful way to end this. I want to thank each of you. I want to thank also both Mike and you, Commissioner, right? Because I think what's beautiful about this is you both have served in our military. You continue to serve our communities. But I also think that's a beautiful story about folks that are in military service, right? The call doesn't stop. And the least we can do is return that favor in a sustainable way. And to Janelle's point, right? Housing's a good starting point and should be one of the first. So I thank you all for being there. Please check out information. We will have plenty of links. We'll be blasting it out on socials. I wish everybody a happy Halloween. Remember to use this bat signal, just a little apropos at the end of this. And again, like this podcast, share it around, and happy Veterans Day to everyone and a happy Halloween.
Happy Veterans Day.